I'd have to say, Jeff, that I do think that Hollywood is to blame for some of this. If you watch some of these movies, the way they glamorize how the grass is greener on the other side, and women
Right,
love those chick flicks. I'm sorry, but they do.
right,
They read the novels and stuff. And it's
right,
always this knight in shining armor that comes to take them away from the abuser or the
right.
guy that's not giving them the fireworks anymore. And I think that's disgusting as a society that we're not putting marriage up on the pedestal and showing them, look, man, marriage is going to have those moments. You just don't want to be in it. You might not even want to look at the person across from you. But if you stick in there and you fix this, you fix this thing every time that you overcome those obstacles, you're going to become a stronger couple and you're going to appreciate what you have. If,
Absolutely.
when my car breaks down, I don't just go buy a new car every time and say, you know what, I'm just going to do this. I'm going to invest in what I got. And it
Right.
seems like all too often, as soon as we hit these little road bumps, let's go get a divorce. And you know what? The states love that. They make money off of that.
Yeah, yeah, and I think you're absolutely right. The any marriage. There was one man who wrote that any marriage is more than 1 week old has a reason for divorce. Now I don't know if that's an exaggeration or not, but the reality is, if you live with another person, you'll find out two things. Number one, I'm a sinner. Number two, my spouse is a sinner. And we are going to sin against each other. But the idea of the marriage covenant is to say, look, we will sin sometimes against each other. We will be imperfect. I'm going to hurt you. You're going to hurt me. We're going to try not to, but inevitably that's going to happen. But we have this covenant, this bond that we will work through it, that we believe, especially if you're a Christian, you come from a Christian perspective, you say, I have made my commitment, my vow first to God. So my marriage first is to God. And I think this is important to remember, because if you look in the New Testament, marriage is actually a symbol of the relationship between Christ and the church. That is how important God looks at it. God performed the first marriage between Adam and Eve. Jesus, when people said, Jesus, can we get divorced from our wives? Basically for any reason, for no reason, can we make up a reason, no fault divorce? And Jesus said from the beginning it was not so. And his disciples were like, well, wait a minute, this is a hard teaching. No, that's the right teaching. But one thing that Jesus said that I really appreciate, he said that, that in the beginning, he created the male and female, and that they were to come together. But he said something else. He said, what God has joined together, let no man take asunder. And the reason that I look at that is because Jesus said this after there was a lot of sin in the world. And again, I'm coming from it from a Christian perspective.
Right.
There was a lot of sin in the world. So at the beginning, that was not a necessary exhortation about, what God has joined together, let no man take apart, because they were in a sinless place. Now, marriage is still sanctified even in a sinful world. In fact, it's given a special prominence. If you look at Jesus' first miracle, where did he take place? At a wedding in Cana of Galilee. If you look at the first event in the Bible after the creation, it was a marriage in the Garden of Eden. One of the last events in the Bible is the marriage supper of the Lamb. Marriage has a very important place. It not only projects the image of God on earth, but it is the absolute best place for children to be raised. Children should not be raised as orphans. In fact, if you look for the scriptures, it talks about God's heart for the orphans. Why? Because they're not in a family. Children need a mother and a father, not 50-50, 100-100. They need both parents. My wife provides something that I cannot provide. I provide something that she cannot provide. We do not come into conflict with each other. We should be saying, this is good. The fact that you can provide something that my children need that I am not equipped to do, and vice versa. And, but we've gotten away from the idea that the teachings of the church even matter. And as you mentioned, Hollywood attacks faith. Hollywood attacks traditional values. Hollywood attacks marriage. Hollywood always makes it look like the grass is greener on the other side. And sometimes they have the movies in which the grass is greener on the other side. But we've got to remember that it is a lie. And even though it may seem greener to us, marriage is not for the parents. Marriage is for children. Because again, this is the environment for children. So what I try to say, Eric, at times too, is that marriage is for children, divorce is for adults, or maybe for one adult, children before adults. In other words, you need to work on your marriage. This idea that you can divorce and it's not going to affect your children, you're being told a lie, you're being lied to, and you're believing a lie. Marriage is for your children and grandchildren. How many people would get divorced if somebody said, Jeff, you're going to divorce your wife, right? Let me tell you what's going to happen to you. If you get divorced, this is what's going to happen to your children. Your son may not graduate from high school. He has a much greater chance of committing suicide, much greater chance of going to prison, much greater chance of dropping out of school, much greater chance of being in poverty, much greater chance of being a crack user. Your daughter, by the way, she has a much greater chance of getting pregnant out of wedlock. She has a much greater chance of going through divorce herself. Is this really what you want to do? And if you're willing to do it to your kids, let me add another step further, because divorce is transgenerational. When you do this, your grandchildren, this is going to happen to your grandchildren. Do you really want to do this to your grandchildren? And I know that many people say, I've got a better heart. I love my grandchildren. I love my children, but it's my grandchildren that I really care for. And, do you really want to do this to your grandchildren? And part of the reason you asked me earlier why I'm doing this is because I've got grandchildren. And my intent is to say, I am going to try to change this system so that they will never have to live through the injustices, that they will never have to suffer these things, that they will never know, that they will know that somebody was out there fighting to protect them. Can you imagine if your grandchildren come up to you and say, Grandpa, did you know that this can happen? And I would say, yes, I did know. And by the way, I did nothing. I may not win, but I'll tell you what, I'm going to go down swinging and fighting. And that's where we need to be, that, we're not doing it for ourselves. Some of us have already gone through this, but we are now fighting for the next generation.
I have to agree, my man. And, that's one thing that I fell in love with you about, Jeff. I think it was at CPAC, we was talking to Miss Kathy Barnett, and she was talking about how she was birthed out of rape. Her
Right.
father had raped her mother, and
Right.
she had that thrown in her face her whole life, that she was
Yeah.
a product of rape. You was a
Yeah.
mistake. You wasn't supposed to be here.
Yeah.
And the whole time I'm talking to Kathy, Jeff is filming me on the other side, and he is bawling.
Yeah.
And I was sitting there trying my best to keep my composure, but I was like, the passion that comes from you, my man, the belief in the fight that you've got in you, I appreciate that. I appreciate that so much, and I wish we had more of that going on.